I knew that I was motivated by impact. I thought, what better way to do it than saving the world from nuclear war?
This is the co-founder and CEO of Arête, Kotryna Jukneviciute. She's revolutionizing the fashion industry with AI to offer tailored recommendations to every user's style. We sat down with her to discuss why she decided to build a startup centered around AI and hear her insights on the future of e-commerce.
Welcome, Kotryna. We're so excited to have you here. The Coeus Collective podcast, on the Coeus Collective podcast, we are into telling the whole story about the founder, not just the story that they're currently living with their company. So we'd love to talk about your background first, because it seems to be at least a little bit different than what you're currently doing.
Yeah, that's one way to put it for sure.
If you could just give a little overview in your own words first, and then we'll get into it further from there.
Sure. Well, I think it's good to start with kind of saying, I'm actually from Lithuania originally.
Amazing.
So for those who don't know, it's a small Baltic state. And my mom won a green card after the collapse of the USSR.
Okay.
And so that is ultimately how I ended up in the States. So she came to the United States first, and then, after some time, she came back and brought me over. And so we grew up in Chicago together, single mom, and really during that time, I fell in love with fashion. Like, I was this kid where I came from Lithuania, where everything that we would wear was dark and gray. And I mean, I don't mean to make it sound bad, because it wasn't really like that bad, but when I got to the United States, it was so colorful. I don't know if you guys remember, maybe people listening will remember this, but there was like Limited 2 and Justice and all these children's clothing stores that were just like bright and sparkly.
Yep.
And I loved it. And my mom and I, honestly, when I came to the States, didn't really have much of anything. And so the way we would spend our time is we would go to like these children's clothing stores, museums, and bookstores. And that's how we spent our weekends. And so I fell in love with fashion at a pretty young age. And then kind of fast forward, I started my first company in 3rd grade, actually.
Tell us about that, please. Was it more than a lemonade stand?
Oh, yeah, definitely more than a lemonade stand.
Awesome.
It's going to make me sound kind of bad, but
tell us.
So I went to the dollar store and I got those fake dollar bills and I put K's on all of them. And I was like, I'm going to create a marketplace. So I was always really crafty. Like, I always loved like creating bookmarks and like scrapbooking and like, greeting cards. And so I made all these bookmarks and I burned a bunch of CDs. So this was when like High School Musical was big, Ally and AJ, like that whole era. And so I burned all these CDs, created bookmarks, and then 3rd and 4th grade, people would like it was pretty intense. Like, people would like be sharpening my pencils and I'd be paying them in Kotryna dollars. It was I say I sort of invented Bitcoin in a way. But
it's decentralized.
Exactly. So I had this whole it would be recess and kids would be playing, and then I'd be like off on the side doing deals. So that was really like my first venture, which almost got me expelled in 4th grade, because I remember so vividly there was like a Princess and the Frog presentation that was happening, and I was like doing a deal over the table and I got caught. And my poor immigrant mother was like, "You've got to be kidding me. Like, we got to this country and now you're gonna get expelled for creating a fake currency in 4th grade and creating like a dictatorship over the school. Like, come on." So yeah, that was like my first memory of kind of really building something. I know it's a really kind of an off story, but I was, ever since then, I was always building and creating, and then obviously went to Georgetown for undergrad and grad school and started an organization while I was there as well.
So I think that's like a really good point there, to talk about the concept of play and like how important that is. There's a ton of studies that show that play actually increases productivity if you have quote unquote playtime even as an adult. And like as a kid, your creativity is boundless, right? Outside of the ability to maybe create what could be deemed, counterfeit money, there is an ability to do almost anything you want. And I think that it's pretty clear probably that, that did relate to your ability to be an entrepreneur today.
Yeah, definitely. I think just having that freedom, and I honestly am really grateful to my mom for this, because I grew up in a household where it was never a question of, if I wanted to be a president. I wanted to be the president of the United States for a while. I can't. I was not born in this country, right? But my mom was like, no, you can change the Constitution. You can do it. So it was this mindset of, yes, playfulness and the ability to dream and to just really kind of go after whatever crazy idea I had. There was never a doubt in my mind that I could do it. Like, I grew up in a home with my mom where, anything that I wanted to do, there was never a you can't do it. It's how hard are you willing to work for it?
Kotryna, I think this interview is going to go amazing because you just connected selling fake money as bookmarks, to potentially becoming president of the United States one day. And I think it kind of made sense, actually.
I know.
So I'm really excited for this interview. I think, though, that we should perhaps take a step actually into your time at Georgetown. A lot of people, a little bit later than 3rd or 4th grade, but they'll do, Model UN in high school. Yeah. And after that, everyone thinks they're an international relations expert, right? But you actually did international relations at an incredibly, exceptional scale. And so we would love to kind of talk about the basics of that and what it's like to interface with the public sector.
Yeah, it's crazy because that was my life for, almost a decade.
Okay.
And I really went into it. Well, so I started actually in high school interning for my congressman. And then obviously when I got to Georgetown, I was also interning on the Hill. I was always interning somewhere, right? Like I was always in school full time and also doing an internship full time.
Yep.
I think that was the beauty, and this, of like going to school in DC, is you had the ability to kind of, do your classes, but then also get a lot of really awesome professional experience. And for me, I knew that I was motivated by impact, and I knew that I wanted to do something that felt like I just wanted to somehow leave a positive mark. And, at that time, I thought, what better way to do it than saving the world from nuclear war? Obviously not to that scale.
That
but
still leaves a positive mark today. At that time, I hope you still think it does. I don't think anybody wants nuclear war.
Absolutely. But I think at that time, I was like, okay, this is definitely the way for me to do it. And obviously coming from a post-Soviet state,
right?
Like there is, and there continues to be a lot of interest in just geopolitics and understanding, how, the complexity of this world and how it all works together. I found even like through my experiences that even just like knowing one word in a local language can have a huge impact on the way that you interact with that population.
Wow.
And I think something like that really translates over as well into my career that I had in foreign policy. And honestly, it was really interesting and really fascinating. And I think, like you said, I was at Georgetown for undergrad. And during that time, I don't know if you know this, but I was also working at the State Department while in undergrad. And then obviously I went directly, did my master's, and I had amazing professors along the way. I had amazing experiences. I lived in over 12 countries.
Wow.
I traveled and backpacked to about 40. Like I had all these experiences that allowed me to really immerse myself into these different countries, whether it was China, Cambodia. I studied abroad in Jordan and Russia. And I really wanted to understand, like, why do we have conflict? Like at the core, we're all humans.
Right.
And so I wanted to understand, like, on a human level, can't we all relate? And I found that to be very true for myself. No matter where I went in the world, all these places where people would say, why are you going there by yourself? It's so dangerous. And I was like, it's actually not.
Yeah.
Like it's only dangerous because we're afraid of the unknown as humans, right? We're very deeply afraid, and our minds get easily manipulated by other people's opinions.
Yep.
And so until you actually expose yourself to different environments and cultures and formulate that opinion on your own, it's really hard to make a decision. And so the reason I say that is because that had a large impact on my decision to then pursue foreign policy and actually do my master's in international security, because I was like, I'm going to take all these experiences that I've had, this understanding of, to a degree of these different cultures and religions, and this appreciation that I developed for all these different cultures and religions. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to apply it into the work that I do in foreign policy and in diplomacy. And so for me, like, that was a really essential step to actually contribute to that ultimate impact that I wanted to generate through a career in foreign policy. unfortunately, I did become a bit disillusioned. But it doesn't mean that it's not a really important path, and it's not something that I find really valuable. And I mean, I, wrote dozens of papers. Like there are plenty of papers that are now published and publicly available about like Belarus, Russia, space security. I led a lot of international deals overseas while I was at RAND.
Wow.
So did a lot of work, and I think it did generate impact. It just wasn't at the scale that I think, and it wasn't at the speed, honestly, that I wanted to move at.
Okay.
I kind of realized that, I really like to be able to see the direct impact of the work that I'm doing and see it move quickly, right? I really love like the startup environment because I love the fast pace. I love being able to problem solve quickly. I enjoy being able to identify an issue, come up with a problem, and see it implemented the next day. And in the foreign policy world, it's just really hard to do, and there is a lot of talking, and that talking is necessary. Diplomacy is amazing, and I am a supporter of like the UN, and there's a whole different camps about whether that won't go down that path right now. But I do think there's a lot of value in it. I just don't think it's where my skills and my personality are best suited to be anymore.
Okay. So can you tell us a bit more about the decision making behind the transition from that field into what you're doing now at Arête?
Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't like I didn't wake up one morning and think, oh my gosh, now I'm gonna start a company. It wasn't like that. Like I mentioned to you, I was always building, right?
Yeah.
Whether it was third grade or then in high school, I had a cupcake company that I ran successfully for about 3 years. At Georgetown, I started a student organization that connected universities across the country for advocacy purposes on the Hill. It's still around to this day. I was always innovating. And when I got to RAND, the first year that I was there, I was doing, the traditional, I was researching, writing. But then the second year, I was fortunate enough to become really close with our vice president.
Oh, wow.
So I was the youngest person to actually be part of our management team, and I got tasked with working on him directly to basically stand up a new effort within the RAND Corporation for international work. So I ended up reaching out and traveling to Europe almost every other month to, figure out what are gaps in countries like Poland, Norway, Finland, Lithuania. I was going and speaking to these governments directly to understand like what are their needs and what business proposals can we draft for them that will allow us to ultimately cooperate and work with these countries. And that was a very entrepreneurial venture in itself within a very large organization. And so for me, when I think back on my life, every couple years, I was always creating and driving some type of entrepreneurial venture forward. That's just been a consistent theme since my earliest days. And so, I also loved fashion. Like that's not something that just popped out of the blue.
Yeah.
I remember when I first got to Georgetown, I applied for an internship with Bloomingdale's my freshman year, and I got rejected.
Oh, no.
And I got rejected, and I was like, I'm not going to be making clothes. That's not my path. And if that's not my path, what else is there? Like I was struggling to figure out where within this industry I would fit in because like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to generate impact. I wanted to have a career that was truly going to, in some way, shape something. In this case, shape an industry. But I knew that was at the core of what I wanted to do with my life. And so when it came to fashion, I loved it so much. But for a while, I thought, maybe that's it. Maybe I just love online shopping, right? Like maybe that's where it ends. Maybe I'm just like doomed to love and hate online shopping, actually, because that's another piece of this whole puzzle.
Okay.
But I realized as I was working at RAND, as I was, building this career, that I was always like kind of lacking that creative part of me. And I was also finding that I was really frustrated with the current system. So like I was working like this intense job, and my outlet would be getting dressed. Like I remember I'd go to the office, and this is true throughout my entire life, whether it was like in middle school where I kept clothing in my locker, or in high school where I was in detention every single day for all the accessories on my uniform. That's like a whole nother story. But that was always a consistent theme in my life. Like I always expressed myself through my clothing and I loved it. And so I remember just kind of working in this job where it was, I enjoyed it, but I felt like there was a part of me that was missing. Like I had to be very buttoned up. I was working, frankly, with, a lot of older men who have families, have had amazing, very respectable careers. But I was kind of trying to fit into this mold of something that just didn't feel like me. And I couldn't really be my full self. And it's a really interesting place to be where, you want to be respected and taken seriously in your career. But then to do that, you almost feel like you have to hide a piece of yourself in order to do that. And so it was just kind of, I was starting to struggle with that. And I started to realize at the same time that the current system of how people are shopping, online shopping, was just really inefficient. So, I had no time to shop ultimately. And so when I did have time, it was like, a couple hours, and I found myself on like the same 2 websites, go like Revolve, Farfetch. And I found myself just scrolling aimlessly through thousands of pieces of clothing that made no sense for me personally because it wasn't tailored to my preferences. And it just felt like I was thrown into this like chaotic system of a very antiquated e-commerce, e-commerce world. I don't even know how best to put it, but I was just frustrated because it would be like 3 a.m. I have to wake up for work the next day. I'm trying to like find things I like, and I have all these events coming up, and I've wasted my time. It's not personalized. I hated shopping. I honestly think Arête was born out of the fact that I developed a hatred for shopping.
You loved it so much that you've started to despise
I was
it.
so frustrated. I was like, I just remember having a gala or something coming up and being like, okay, I need to block off like 7 hours of my day to scroll through this and this and this website. And I was like, this is so ridiculous. Like, why isn't there a system that just understands me, that is efficient and can just generate outputs for me that I can then go in, I can purchase, and caveat, I don't want to look like everyone else. So that's an important piece of Arête that was really important to me too, was I actually love finding really cool designers and new pieces. And so I want to find a system that makes it efficient, personalized, fun to discover these new brands and is tailored to me. And so like Arête was really, I would say, a culmination of all these life experiences that I had, this consistent passion for fashion that
Passion for fashion.
that I honestly developed as a kid, and it was consistent throughout my life, regardless of what career I had. And this just desire to really solve a problem that I see as finally solvable, and something that I see as really shaping the next decade of what e-commerce is going to look like.
Okay.
So we've talked about now the impetus for creating Arête. And we've talked about, even you as the first potential use case of this and first potential, target customer. It's always great to create a product for yourself because nobody knows you like you do. And I think that what you just said is effectively you had an issue, you identified it, you go problem first, not solution first, and then create a company around the problem that you yourself are trying to solve. I think that that's a great way to start a business. So that origin story is awesome, but I think we should get in for the audience just a little bit about what Arête actually does. We can run through the app. I signed on for an account. I thought it was really easy to sign on for an account. Immediately, it gave me an awesome outfit. I clicked on it. I almost bought it already. And it was just like my style, and all I had to put in was 5 keywords. So if you can explain the basics of the app, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, so, and actually that verification piece, like putting your account together, we'll be removing that pretty soon.
Okay.
So you'll be able to still create your account if you want more personalized recommendations, but it's a friction point we identified. So a lot of learnings when you're building a startup. It's like, what you see is going to be totally different in a week and in a month and in 2. So what Arête is doing is we're using AI to generate full outfit recommendations for our users based on their individual style preferences, their occasions, their vibes. So I say vibes because we're actually training our AI to understand sentiment in clothing, which is really novel to us.
All right.
And the more that you engage on Arête, your passive engagement on the social side. So let's say, your favorite like influencer, like your favorite stylist or brand, as you engage with their photos, your personal AI model learns to understand your tastes better. And so when you go into the styler, you say, hey, like I'm going to dinner, I want to feel confident, or I want to feel sexy, my style is edgy, and we generate full outfits for you that are tailored to those preferences, and they're all shoppable and from emerging designers. So we work directly with the creator economy because they're amazing creators and designers who just don't have the resources to spend thousands, hundreds of thousands on Google marketing,
Right.
but we can use our technology to put them in front of the shoppers who are actually most excited about their products.
So you referenced a bit the way that you're looking into how people are using the app now. How exactly are you able to do that?
So how are we training our model?
Yeah, or just the context of like doing the user experience research. What does your current research and development process look like? Like, for example, you said that now you're going to be removing that onboarding step.
Yeah. So I think at this point we've done over probably like 50 focus groups.
50.
Yeah, we've done, the company actually started with a focus group.
Okay.
I think it's so funny because I remember when this idea came about, like even on New Year's, I sat around at a dinner table on New Year's and people went around the table and said, what are they doing this year? And I said, I'm starting my company. So, and I did the next day.
Awesome.
So, but that learning process is really impacted by a couple pieces. So those focus groups, I think, have been really helpful. But one thing that we've also found is people say what they want, but it's not actually what they do all the time, right? And especially when you're talking about an app. We will have a web page coming soon as well.
Okay.
That's another learning.
Amazing.
Lots of learnings. But ultimately, it's those focus groups and feedback sessions have been really helpful with like our power users to understand what are they liking the most. We also obviously track events, right? So we have our own dashboard built out on the back end, which allows us to track user behavior, everything from, where are you going when you first sign on? How much time are you spending? What, like your rage taps, where are they happening? When are you exiting? Why are you exiting? Where are you getting stuck? Like, what are you saying? Like all that information we're tracking because ultimately that is really important. Those are learnings for us that allow us to very actively every single week, basically at this point, release a new version. Obviously, we don't want to be doing that, in H2 necessarily, but right now it's really good because it's allowing us to just see actually some of those learnings too. We started out with thinking people would want to follow their friends, but actually what we're learning is that that more Pinterest-esque approach on the social side is proving more effective for our audience because when it comes to fashion, people want to engage and they want to be social, but they want to get inspiration from people whose style they like. So what we're finding for that like passive engagement piece is it's actually more effective to provide like really good inspiration. And we're actually building out the ability for you to click on a photo and purchase similar items as well through the styler. So there are a lot of like really exciting, I'm happy to talk about like the roadmap and what's on the horizon for this year, but a lot of everything that we're doing is directly impacted by the feedback that we're getting both through these like feedback sessions as well as through very active data analytics that we're doing on the back end of our user behavior.
So I think that we do want to get into the roadmap. And the reason why is that I've seen this kind of part of this throughout your career. You have had the ability, I think, to distill complex information down into frameworks. I think when you're a research analyst, you're doing that. I think in your current role, you're clearly doing that as well with your user experience design. And perhaps if you can run through not just what the roadmap is, but how you are creating the goals within that roadmap. From now, I think that would be really helpful because we can lay out a roadmap, but we can also tell people how they can create their own roadmap. And I think that would be a cool exercise for us.
So kind of what you're talking about is I'm going to give an example, right?
Yeah, of course.
Later this year, we're going to train our AI on accessories, right? Like we'll add in accessories, shoes, handbags, etc.
Amazing.
So what you want to know is with that kind of big piece for execution, how do you distill that into smaller pieces of the puzzle?
Yep.
Okay. Actually, I think a good example for this is our centralized checkout, which launched on Wednesday.
Great.
Okay.
So that was a big push. And you know this, like startup world, you'll have a very clear roadmap, and then all of a sudden it's like a couple days before and everything's on fire.
Yeah.
And your roadmap's like, okay, let's change all this. So I think that with the centralized checkout that launched on Wednesday, there are a lot of pieces to that, right? There's the back end, there's the front end, there's the design component, there's brand partnership. So Arête is pretty complex in terms of all the components because we have the direct brand partnerships, which means that we have contracts with all the designers that we're working with, which means that we have to integrate into their Shopify, which means we have to connect to their Stripe accounts, which means that Arette's Stripe account has to be connected, which means our contracts with those brands have to be finalized in terms of what percentage we're getting of each sale. It means everyone has to agree to the same return policy, the same shipping policy. So there are a lot of details that you have to address when you're talking about this one central goal, right? So in our case, centralized checkout. So I think, and I'm thinking out loud, so bear with me here, but when you're talking about a centralized checkout and kind of diluting that further, it's identifying within the company what are all, like which kind of verticals within the company are going to have to play a significant role in the execution of this larger goal.
Right.
So in our case, right, there was the product, the tech, the front end, back end, design, you had the brand partnerships, you had legal, you had finance, obviously marketing plays a component in it too.
Yeah. And
so then within that, you have to then go further down and say, okay, if it's on the design side, now with the design component, how is the UX and the UI experience going to look, right, with the centralized checkout? And then you have to make sure that those verticals within the company are communicating with each other. So basically there's clear tasks that each vertical has to execute on. So for the design side, right, building out what that checkout looks like. And then there has to be a very direct line of communication between the front end and the back end. So you have to make sure that, what is actually designed is technologically feasible. So there has to be a lot of communication that happens there. And then you also have to make sure the timelines are right. So I think setting timelines is really important. And it's honestly something that I am constantly learning to be better at because for me, everything's always on fire. Like we're running, I'm like, you know what? Like we had to do this last week. This was supposed to be done a month ago.
Yep.
And I love my team for putting up with me for that. And so something that I honestly learned even with this launch of the centralized checkout for us is that, we have to make sure that we have a very, honestly, however much time you think something's going to take, double it.
Double it.
Okay.
You'll think it takes a week. It'll take 2 weeks, right? And so that was a really great learning for us. And so I think setting those timelines and almost having 2 different timelines, right? Like I think this is kind of a little secret.
A little
for
note.
me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's almost like you have the timeline that you share and that you outline and that's on the calendar for everyone to know what they're working towards.
Okay.
And then you have your own internal timeline.
Okay.
That can be a little bit longer maybe because then you can kind of get to a happy medium.
Right.
With whatever is aiming to launch.
Okay.
And I think that's a superpower of a great founder. It's the concept of not only being able to manage your team, but also managing yourself. And when you're just starting something out, you are your team, but whoever's helping you out is going to need to sometimes be on a different timeline, and that's okay. As long as you're able to motivate, I think that's the thing that's most important here. So we were speaking about the concept of creating a marketplace, right? And a question that I would have is, which side do you think has been more difficult so far? The supply side, so working with brands, or the kind of demand side, working with people to get on the app?
Look, getting people to download an app is hard. Like,
right.
I would say because of the way that we work with brands, it's actually not that difficult.
Okay.
I would say finding the right brands and getting them to respond to you can be hard. We have we found a lot of hacks. So for example, I work with a lot of showrooms in New York City.
Okay.
And showrooms will basically be there to build up brands, usually small emerging brands. So once you get in with a showroom, you can almost kind of start working with all the brands that they're working with. So that's been really effective for us. And for me, all these designers are my friends now, right? I think that's really key in the creative space, especially, is a lot of it comes down to, can you trust each other? And are you authentic in your relationship and truly trying to help each other? And what we're building foundationally, like Arette's entire mission as a company, and how we're even building it, and even the contracts that we have in place, are really clearly focused on building up these brands and helping these designers succeed and be successful and grow with us. And so on the brand side, it's fun. Like it's not, I'm not gonna say it's easy, right?
Yeah.
It's not like everyone responds to you, but because we're working with emerging designers, because we can actually have these human touch points with everyone, it's a bit different. Now on the customer angle, it's interesting because we host a lot of events. And so people who hear about us, they will download. And I think one thing for us is that we launched on January 31st.
Okay.
We launched an awful version of the product, right? Like we launched something that if I saw it right now, I would.
Oh, come on.
It was so bad. It was so bad. But that was very intentional. That was on purpose because we were like, you know what? We're just going to put this out there and we're going to build as we go.
Course.
We're just going to like figure it out as we go, see what's working, what's not working. And that's very true for us for H1. Obviously now H2 is when more of our actual marketing efforts kick in. So we have like influencer programs that are launching this month.
Wow.
So a lot more marketing efforts are now going to be kicking in. But I would say on the customer side, everyone who hears about it, especially in our target demographic, are super excited. They're like, where is this? Why isn't this here yet? Like, I need this in my life. There is like a need. People's eyes light up and they're like, I understand this problem. You know, I am a working professional in New York who wants to spend time with friends instead of online shopping for hours. And so it's there. And I think now it's honestly on us to start to actually push a lot more heavily now that we're in a place where we're starting to be at least comfortable with the way that it's working.
I think in the context of perhaps like there being larger companies, maybe there's a first mover advantage that smaller companies have for AI currently. And then as larger companies enter the space, you know, what is the effect that AI could possibly have on those smaller companies? Because then initially, you know, larger companies are perhaps slower to be able to adapt to new technology, and maybe they'll catch up over time. Or maybe you don't think they'll catch up. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are ultimately so take Instagram Shop, for example, right? It was not doing well, and it's not doing well because people are not going to Instagram to shop. No matter what you try to do, you're not going to, at least I don't think Instagram is going to turn into like the main place where everyone goes to shop, right? Yeah. I think like TikTok Shop is great, like it's learning very quickly. But when it comes to things like Amazon, where sure, there's a lot of financial resources that you could put behind it, but our entire value prop with these emerging brands, that social component and the way that we're actually training, it is just not something that Amazon is going to go after. They're not going to go after these like small and emerging brands. It's not enough for them. And for us, we're also very grounded in community. And so being able to kind of build from the ground up and almost capture a very niche part of this market from the very beginning to then expand outwards is the approach that we're taking. So honestly, our competitors aren't even like the Amazons or the Nordstroms. That's not what we're looking at. It'd be more, you know, who else, where are customers going when they're shopping? Or, you know, what are companies that are maybe in a similar space that are, you know, solving the problem in maybe a different way, but, you know, still kind of get like put into that bucket of fashion tech. So that would be more in our competitor landscape. We've thought about this, you know, about that, and it's just really not where our concern is. I mean, I've spoken to like Hearst for a bit, and they're looking at ways to basically bring on startups and companies that are doing what we're doing to just plug into their online
Ecosystem,
platforms. Yeah. So, for example, like Hearst owns like, Elle and a lot like Harper's Bazaar and Shop Bazaar and stuff. And so they're not necessarily looking to really, at least from what I've seen, to do it all themselves as much as they're looking to see like who's doing it and kind of plug it in. I know Nordstrom recently came out with kind of their own version of like a shopping tool.
Got it.
And I think more of these large retailers will do that, but it's just not really, at least our main concern.
I think a positive outlook on artificial intelligence is something that I'm always looking to hear. So I think that that's great. And I think that your concept of building out community seems really relevant, not only for the consumers that are going to download the app, but also for the brands that are on the app. And hypothetically, what I'm seeing is that you could then provide those brands with an outlet like Harper's Bazaar they would not have had a connection to without being on Arête. And that's like true value add. I think when you're creating a double-sided marketplace, the supplier relationship is just as important, I think, sometimes as the demand relationship.
Yeah.
Because if you're not going to have great suppliers, nobody's going to be on, your app or on your marketplace buying things. Yeah. So to keep building on the concept of community, though, something that I was thinking of while I was looking through the Arête app is the concept of how Arête signifies what I would perceive to be a change in the social media landscape. I would actually argue that Strava, the running app, and Belly, the app where you rate, your cuisine, which is awesome. Everyone in New York is using it. I am at Antonio, got in 2021. I'm just saying, early adopter. But in my opinion, Strava and Belly are actually social media apps. And an idea that I had, when I was looking through Arête, I said, this signifies a broader trend that I'm seeing, which is that those apps are the future of social media, small community-based apps. And I'm not saying that one day they're going to overtake, one of those apps is going to overtake Instagram and everybody's going to be just talking about fashion all the time, but rather social media will distill perhaps into an amalgamation of smaller apps based on these more niche communities. I think that Gen Z would absolutely love that. I think that there's a concept of people wanting to be seen in their own unique way and not falling into whatever the larger social media trap is. Do you see how Arête could potentially fit itself into a future social media space?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If we didn't, we wouldn't have the Explore page. I think for us, fashion is ultimately a very emotional experience, right? Like if you look at how we talk about it, empowering authenticity, inspiring confidence, like fashion is something that you want to share with your friends. It's something that when you feel good, you look good, you're like, I want to snap a picture of this. Yep. Like I feel fire today. And so it's a very social activity inherently. We always think back to walking around in Soho shopping with our friends, right?
Yep.
And so because of that, like Arête has from the very beginning built in that social component into its core. Now, being a startup, we have to obviously focus in on like what is our moat and make sure that our tech is working, make sure that we are building this strong tech-enabled marketplace. But it's ultimately fueled by that social component. And I think you're absolutely right. Like there is a lack right now in the landscape for a fashion community. There is nowhere that you can go today that is, I don't really think that there is. Maybe like there are like some Reddit channels or, you can go to Pinterest, but even that's like kind of all over the place, right? Yeah. It's not working. And so there's not really a fashion community out there where you can go and be like, okay, I'm going to go here because this is my like fashion social community. I'm going to share, I'm going to get inspiration here, and I'm going to discover and shop. And when Arête started, we actually created this like feedback loop, and we were thinking about what's the present and what's the future. And so the present, when you think about it, there are all these different channels. There's the Pinterest, there's the Google for searching, there's the Instagram for some discovery, there's like iMessage if you want to share, but it's all it's complicated because you have to go to all these different places. Whereas with Arête, it's uniting that user experience into something where now your discovery is happening, where your sharing is happening, which is ultimately impacting your discovery and shopping journey. And so it's and that's what makes sense. At least it's it's that, that closed circle, that closed feedback loop in the fashion world is what we're really lacking too.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I love the word discovery. Do you think that Arête could perhaps do for fashion discovery what Shopify has done for music? Sorry, Spotify has done for music discovery. I guess Shopify, they're not really a platform. So Shopify for e-commerce brands, I mean, I guess maybe technically. But
we love Shopify.
I do too. I walked past their building in Toronto recently, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
That is like, it was like I was in Rome. I was going to like the head of the Catholic Church. Like, everything was there. Anyways, the concept of music discoveries for Spotify, Arête, fashion discovery. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I don't even have to say a ton on that. I think I've gotten asked that question quite a few times recently, and the answer is a simple yes.
Okay, that's great. We did think about that, and it's cool to see that other people have also thought of that too. So that's amazing. You have mentioned community building, and another idea that popped into my head was the concept of secondhand sales, and how that could potentially factor into Arête.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Maybe tell us more about that. We actually found a stat from Capital One that said that online secondhand sales of clothing are expected to grow 21% on average every year for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's a growing market. How does Arête fit in?
Absolutely. And, I think before a couple questions ago, we were talking about this like strategic approach, right? And this like roadmap, and really kind of seeing the big vision and being able to map it out backwards. And secondhand is top of mind for me all the time. When you think about the retail industry, it's moving away from the large retailers. It's moving away. I mean, fast fashion is a whole nother conversation I won't get into right now.
Okay.
But these emerging brands and thrifted secondhand clothing are really on the rise and continue to be. And so with Arête, how we're thinking about it is, as we continue to train our AI to understand this layer of like metadata around clothing, to understand your preferences and style clothing for you, we can ultimately plug in to like a Real or a Poshmark down the road, right? We're positioning ourselves to be able to ingest some of these online platforms, e-commerce systems that have thousands and thousands and thousands of SKUs that are really hard to search through. We want to be able to make it a lot easier for you to say, hey, I am looking for, an outfit for a picnic in New York City, and I want to feel romantic, and I want to look, shop from the Real. Generate outfit recommendations or item recommendations for me from some of these secondhand e-commerce platforms. So we're very much thinking about integrating those platforms as well. Another piece of it kind of goes back to the social component. So if you look on Arête, even right now, when you save an outfit or an item, you can actually upload your own items, and we'll show you what to buy to complete the look. So our AI will clean the image, tag it. It'll be in your closet, and you can actually play with it and get recommendations of what to pair with it. Now, as you build out that closet, it's actually open for your followers to engage with and see. So we're not doing this yet, but that's very much an intentional decision to position ourselves to be able to allow you to ultimately open up your closet to rent, borrow, sell, exchange, all those, those buzzwords around secondhand that we hear. By building out your closet, your profile, and that social piece, it's allowing Arête to, down the road, tap into that secondhand market as well.
That's amazing. And I think that would do wonders for you with, growing with the audience that is really into sustainability as well, and allow you to have a social entrepreneurship component. Something that I personally believe is that almost every entrepreneur is a social entrepreneur. I think that there's opportunities to do good everywhere. And, Arette's already making people feel great, providing them, supporting small businesses, small brands, providing them with an opportunity to express themselves. In my opinion, that's social entrepreneurship, and that would just add another layer to it. Unfortunately, we are nearing the end of our time now. So we do love to talk about, what your greatest lesson was in building Arête so far? And if you can share that, I think that would be really great.
So I would say greatest lesson is trusting your gut and treating your gut as a muscle, as something that needs to be trained, because, we didn't get into all the details of the company from last year, but there were highs and there was a very specific low.
If you'd like to tell us,
if you'd
we'd love to hear.
tell us.
Yeah.
There was just there was a low that had to deal with internal team structure. And, I think through that, it was almost like a punch in the gut. And it made me take a step back and think, okay, you really need to make sure that you're trusting your instincts.
Right.
Because I'm not saying your instincts are always right, but the more that you trust them, the more that you train that muscle, the more refined they become, and the more you're able to listen to those instincts in very, high pressure situations. And so I think for me, the biggest learning was to really strengthen that gut. And I listen to my instincts a lot. I mean, obviously, I also look at the numbers. I look at the data. I look at what are we actually capable of doing as a company? Where are we? But I listen to my gut a lot. And it has, become better and better at giving me the right signals. And so I think just listening to your instincts is something that I have refined and become better at over the course of building this company.
I mean, Kotryna, if you're not going to trust yourself, who is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
no, that's number one lesson from my mom, too.
I mean, especially in the context of a business like Arête.
Yeah.
It's dual-sided marketplace. You have team members, you have investors, right?
Yeah.
That's so many different people.
So many.
But instead, it's you, where this all
Yeah.
came from. And remembering that, I think, is super key.
In the contrary, I was just wondering, what are some of the highlights or memorable moments you would like to share or you remember during this growth?
Oh, so many. Actually, one recently happened. We had our team dinner a couple nights ago, our New York-based team.
Love that.
And I remember I was sitting in the car on the way back, and I was getting kind of emotional on the way back because I was reflecting how, it's not only that, there's this company that's growing and building, but it's the fact that we're all friends. And it's like, what I love about Arête too is our team. We really have an amazing culture where everyone is friends, everyone's laughing. People give me shit all the time, right? I love that the Arête team is able to call me out on my bullshit all the time. And it's so good because it means that we've built a culture in the company where there is truly this open channel of communication and honesty and transparency from all from the ground up, bottom up, wherever. And so that's really special to me. And so that dinner, just kind of going home from that dinner, I felt really, it's still the beginning in so many ways, right? This is a decade-long play, but it was just really powerful to be like, wow, look at how far we've come, and look at the fact that we're all here together building with the same vision. We all believe in it. That's so cool.
It's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah.
There's nothing that matches the feeling of having a cohesive team.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Feel very lucky. I really love my team.
And, this has happened for you because you've built a mission-driven business.
Yeah.
I mean, you know exactly what you want to accomplish. You've been doing this since you were in grade school. You've been passionate. You've had your passion for fashion for a long time. So you're doing great right now. And what's next?
Well, we are, a lot of people say they want to see the clothing on themselves. So obviously that's, we're thinking about when is the right time for us to start integrating body scanning and facial scanning software.
Wow.
That will probably come next year, at least in a, more of a mass approach, but we're starting to test with some software companies, plug and play that. We'll obviously start integrating and training on accessories at the end of this year, most likely, because, when you're talking about styling, accessories a lot of it's about accessories, right?
Yep.
And then, that second hand, you brought up a really important question that is, top of mind for us too. So that will be something that we'll be looking at tackling probably towards like middle of end of next year, honestly. But yeah, some big pieces of the puzzle that are really clearly still missing in the company. But first, we want to really get our recommendation engine right, and make sure that this first version of the product is working in a way that we're happy with before we expand out.
One thing that we like to ask all our guests is, what advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs looking to potentially start their own company one day?
Well, I think a lot of times, like, there's going to be thousands and thousands of reasons why you shouldn't do something,
Right.
right? Like, in your head, you'll always be afraid. There's always going to be that voice in your head that says, but am I qualified enough? Or, I don't know the right people, or, like, look at everyone else who's doing it. What makes me the right person to do it? So you're not alone in asking those questions, because in reality, everyone is asking those questions. And if all it took to build a successful company was an idea, everyone would be an entrepreneur. Yeah. But in reality, that's not the case. And so as you ask all those questions and you question your ability to move forward with it, if you can think of like one or two reasons why you're like, no, I am so convicted and passionate about this problem or about this idea that like I'm going to do it. If you can tell yourself and be very honest with yourself and say, as shit hits the fan, like, I'm passionate enough about this problem to continue forward.
Yep.
And all these questions I have about my abilities that are in my head, I know that I have the capacity to solve them, answer them, break through all the walls, and just do it. Just go back to your gut and go back again to those couple reasons why you should, and try to block out the negative thoughts, right? Like, if you really feel strongly about something and that's the direction that you think you need to go in, like, don't limit yourself just because your mind says one thing but your heart says something else. Like, just drive forward with your passion and you'll figure it out as you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kotryna, for being here. And do you have anybody or anything you want to plug on your way out?
Yeah, I mean, you can download Arête in the App Store, Arête, ARETE fashion. You can also check out our website, Arête, ARETEFORYOU.com. We host events like 3 to 4 times a month at this point. Everything from like exclusive shopping events to like leadership dinners, clothing swaps, soirees, you name it, we're doing it. And so would love to see anyone and everyone at all of our events. And you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at ARETE_AI. And yeah, happy to be here. And thank you guys both for having me and for facilitating this conversation. It's been really fun to talk all things Arête. So
thank you, Kotryna. Thank you for being there. Hopefully we'll see you at a soiree one day.
Absolutely.